Hello, everyone. My name is Elena Salinas. I'm an independent journalist and contributor with CBS News. So great to join you and very excited to have this conversation with my good friend and fellow journalist and entrepreneur, Maria Hinojosa. Maria, I'm going to talk about you like if you weren't here. I have known Maria for many years. I don't really remember how many, but it's been like if I've known her for all of my life. We met through a mutual friend, Sandra Thomas, at a conference for the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And since then, I have followed her career, her movidas. I collaborated with her for a short time on Latino USA. I witnessed the birth of Futuro Media. And more than anything else, I sat in awe of her resilience and her passion, not just for storytelling, but for educating and inspiring the next generation of Latino journalists. I can go on and on, but why don't we just go directly to hear from Maria so you get to know more about the Maria that I know. And just as a reminder, immediately after our conversation, we will get to your questions so you can put them in the little box on the side that says Q&A. Amiga, how are you? ¿Cómo estás? How are you doing these days?
You know what? Te voy a decir una cosa, the truth, because I only deal in the truth. Every day, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so thankful to be alive. Oh my God, here we are. We made it. I just feel like after the darkness of where we were a year ago to now, I'm just incredibly grateful. And to be with you, pues feliz.
Un placer, Maria. So I want to dive into some aspects of your book, Once I Was You, a memoir of love and hate in the Torn America, which was fascinating to me. Of course, I didn't get to read it in a printed version. I got it on email, but it was fascinating to me. Now, you talked about so many impactful moments and experiences that have shaped you into the person and the journalist that you are today. But you also dive into so much of what's going on in today's political landscape. So let's unpack some of those moments. Let's start with, you write about the US government and how it is selective and strategic when it comes to deciding who's allowed to come in, and that the government grants asylum when it's politically advantageous to them. What immigration, refugee, asylum trends are you seeing now? And what do you anticipate happening with this current presidential administration?
Well, Maria Elena, you know this has been a pretty interesting week in relation to this conversation.
Right.
And I think it's been something
of a... I see your tweets, but tell us all.
Well, so what day was it? Monday. I think it was Monday. The vice president goes down to Guatemala, and I'm just working. I'm working. And at the end of the day, I see the news headline, right? I'm seeing the snippets, which is essentially, the vice president, daughter of immigrants, saying in Guatemala to Central American people, don't come. Don't make the trek to the border. I was confused because it's almost like they're not going to the border. They're going to a place where they believe their lives can be safe. So the notion that there was this like, don't come, was a very, I tweeted out immediately. I said, I feel sucker punched. I feel I feel ill. I feel so sad about this, because this is a moment of such an extraordinary opportunity. Okay. Like if we're going to try to take what we have learned from the pandemic, which is to take something very difficult and sad and flip it and try to learn from it, right, and be better from it. We're in that same position on the issue of immigration. And you and I know that there's such an opportunity to flip the narrative to the truth, to what is correct. And I feel like we're losing that opportunity. And therefore, I have to say, this week again has been hard, because I feel like, oh my God, we're not making progress on this issue. I feel like we're going backwards and we're repeating things. And I get very anxious in terms of US policy. So
but
it's been a tough...
and the administration between a rock and a hard place when it comes to this issue.
Yes, but also, Maria Elena, this has been going on for so long. You and I have been covering the story of Central America and the United States since the 1980s. Joe Biden has been around in politics since the 1980s. This is not a, oh, we weren't prepared kind of situation. Oh, we were going to get to it kind of situation. This is a historical moment for our times and for this government, for this moment. So it can't be like, oh, we were surprised, we weren't prepared. No, the preparation, the understanding that there's a history here, and therefore the Biden administration coming in with an extensive plan to understand from the very beginning, so that we didn't get the narrative of like, oh my God, what's happening at the border? We weren't expecting. This is a crisis. It's like, the numbers have been going up. The people who are showing up there are desperate. They are refugees. Are we a country that accepts refugees, or are we a country that doesn't? And I think that goes to our central question in our country.
You also write extensively about your experiences visiting ICE detention centers and about the horrible conditions and the lack of basic due process. You also write about how change begins with knowledge. What should the Latino leaders here with us today know about the current state of the situation, and what can they do to help?
Look, I understand. I really understand when people say, like, we can't just talk about immigration. Like, I get that, right? I am an immigrant. I was born in Mexico. I was almost taken from my mother when I came to the United States in an airplane with a green card. So this was, in 1962. So we have to assume responsibility for it. It's not whether or not we want to, we like to. As leaders, we have no choice, because it is targeted on Latinos and Latinas, even though we know that who's being held in those detention facilities are people from India, people from Jamaica, people from Cuba, people from Pakistan, people from China, but it is focused on Latinos and Latinas. And it is focused on dehumanizing us. Therefore, we can't think like, oh, well, my family came, I'm the second or third, so this doesn't. If we are Latinos and Latinas today, it does impact us. We are impacted by that dehumanization, and we are the ones who have to change it. And here's the thing, Maria Elena, óyeme, I'm sure you feel the same way. I'm kind of like, look, I'd love to be talking about something else in this time in my life, but I feel the weight of history on my shoulders, and I know that my role as a journalist of conscience, journalist of color and of conscience, but a journalist of conscience, following in the footsteps of my godfather of American journalism, Frederick Douglass. No me callo.
Right.
No me callo.
Right. Silence is complicity. Let's get personal with a few of the next questions, Maria. You've struggled mentally and emotionally as a result of things that you've experienced and that you've seen in your line of work, and that you've experienced personally also. How do you stay positive in your day-to-day life? How do you manage to cope and to, I don't know, remain optimistic, or somewhat optimistic? Because I know what you're saying right now seems like not that you're being negative, but that you're very, I guess you're being real, right?
Exacto.
Real,
exacto.
but at the same time, optimistic that it can change and that it can improve.
Bueno, porque if I was to fold my hands, and just be like, no, pues, then it's not going to change. So how do I find my joy? I work for it. I think losing my best friend, Cecilia Weissman, que en paz descanse, in 2015, and holding her hand as she took her last breath, a fellow Latina journalist, and she said, I just wish people would find more joy in every moment, because she was overwhelmed with a lot of anxiety as a Latina journalist. And I really took that to heart. And so I made a lot of changes in my life. I meditate daily. I really have spent some time. That's why I'm here in Connecticut. In front of me is all nature. So I disconnect from New York City, which I love, and connect with nature.
You do a little bit of boxing. I see it on Instagram.
I work out intensely, and because of the pandemic, I found a group of people who work out outside, and we've become this really, international family that is representative of Harlem. And I am focused a lot on gratitude. Like, people are like, I'm grateful. No, like, I had to, there was a time when I lost so much, so that the notion of focusing on gratitude, like actually being like, no, es que I'm going to do that. So that's how I do it. But I battle sadness. I have people who are calling me all the time, and sometimes I can't take their call because I cannot take their call. I have to be with my family. You know how that goes. But it's my responsibility to remain hopeful.
I mean, I know you're a tough cookie, and you wrote about how you learned to grow an even thicker skin while you were at CNN, thanks in part to the bro-heavy culture. You said you had to pretend to be deaf so that jokes couldn't touch you. So what advice do you have for women to cope with this kind of behavior?
Well, that's a difficult question because, back then, Maria Elena, we didn't, where were you going to complain? The issues came fast and furious. I just remember just like being like, okay, dodging that one and dodging this one. I really did have like the boxing into it, just kind of like, how am I going to weave out of this? So I think it's a very different moment right now. Women understand that there is no place for bad behavior in a newsroom.
Right.
It's very hard to speak up. And I think that, we all have to be super aware of who we are, especially those of us who are leaders. How do we handle ourselves? I had to learn the hard way that kind of centering humility with my staff was really important, to acknowledge mistakes that I made, even because that shows, that I'm prepared to be humble and hear the criticism. With women and men, I think that it's, not a question of being humble. It's just not allowed.
Yeah.
It's just not allowed. Find the compañeras that you can talk to who have been through this so that they can help guide you, because we've been through it and we can help guide you. Pero no te quedes callada contigo misma, because people want to help you manage this.
Right. Now, before we get to the last couple of questions, I'm just reminding everyone that you can go to the Q&A section if you have any questions. I don't see any right now. So if you have any questions for the wonderful Maria Hinojosa, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A section right now. Maria, we've both, been in this game for a long time, and we've seen a lot. Today, it's easier than ever before to spread disinformation and undermine professional journalism. You've seen it, you've lived it. I'm in Miami, so I've lived it intensely. What do you make of the current landscape of media, and what industry changes do you anticipate, both positive and negative?
Well, look, I'm kind of obsessed with this issue, right, of the misinformation and the disinformation and the lies, frankly. I mean, this is huge. It's a massive problem. And I worry about it. And I want to have more kind of analytical, academic, and theoretical, but also based on reality conversations about how we as a society and as journalists combat this. On a personal level, I meet people where they are. I mean, now that I'm kind of more out and about, because I wasn't seeing anyone, but in my past, I always try to meet people where they are and move with curiosity. But we need to be doing that as opposed to fighting with each other, because I don't think that's very productive. On the other hand, the role of media, I think that this is just such a huge question, Maria Elena. We could spend an hour talking about this, and I know we have like 2 minutes, but I think it's structural. Okay, so I think it's structural. I think we have to think about how we do a massive critique of the mainstream media that is essentially still owned and operated essentially by white men, straight, presenting, heterosexual, of privilege. And the world is much more complex than that.
Yeah.
And we have to be a part of the conversation of dismantling and challenging this misinformation.
You know what? I'm going to go directly to the questions because I see some very good questions here. One of them is from Irma Valdez. Maria, how do we bridge the divide? Our own community does not understand the issue. How do we bring all political parties together?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Part of this question about our community doesn't understand the issues, I mean, that is so true.
Yeah, and we're not all on the same page. I don't think that there's one answer. That's why when people are like, how do we do it? I'm like, you know what? You think that I have the answer, that Maria Elena has the answer. But actually, we have to acknowledge that within our own communities, we have to find those answers. And I say that with a lot of love and respect, which is, there isn't a playbook for how we do this. But I know that, again, it's so pre-pandemic, everywhere I went, whether or not people knew who I was always engaging in, talking about, so do you vote? What do you think? This and that. Because that is, in fact, a form of small d democracy. And Latinos and Latinas, we have to be talking politics, US politics, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, yes, we don't want to overwhelm our kids and make them sick of us. Believe me, I know. But there has to be an acknowledgement of owning the conversation of American politics in our household with our kids. That is because if we are not doing democracy, óyeme, if Latinos and Latinas are not doing democracy in every form, from the dinner table to the voting booth, democracy in this country dies. So that's how we have to think about it.
Yeah. I have another question from Lupita Montoya. How do we get stories about less known topics? I'm sorry, I have to lean in, I'm a little blind. How do we get stories about less known topics like Latinx and academia to you? Precisely because there is so much misinformation in the media. We need to give spaces to our own experts. Thank you, Lupita, for the question.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where Latino USA, that's what Futuro Media does. That's what In the Thick does. That's what everything that we produce. So go to Futuro Media, our website, and you can see everything that we produce is about creating that dynamic and telling these stories from our perspective. And it's just like, oh, you have a Latino agenda. And it's like, well, we're Latinos and Latinas, many of us. And we're telling these stories, but actually we're great journalists, we're great writers, we're great thinkers, and we're Americans. So let's just do this together and inform each other.
Right. Another question from Wendy Maldonado de Amico. Do you have any thoughts on how we as individuals and leaders can help move the needle on immigration reform?
Hi, Wendy. I think, again, I struggle with the fact that I'm going to say something in Spanish, que a mí se me ha colmado el plato. Okay. When my father would say, se me ha colmado el plato, I'd just be like, oh my God, or he would say, estoy hasta aquí, no aguanto más. I always knew that I was like, That's how I feel about this moment in the United States of America. And I'm very conflicted about having a lack of patience in this time. On the other hand, because I've been covering this, my very first story for NPR was in the year 1985 about people protesting against immigration reform then. And so this issue must be dealt with, and not in the way in which we've dealt with it in the past, but in a way that accepts what the future really is. There's nothing to fear. We are an immigrant and refugee country. And how many years they've been saying that this country is like, oh my God, imagínate, Maria Elena has been at the forefront. Spanish language is going to take over. Everywhere it's going to be. A ver, aquí estamos. So we need to deal with the fear. And that means every single one of you has got to engage at the level of calling, meeting, because if you're leaders, with senators, with local, on the straight up political level, to having that conversation in your living room, in your kitchens, with your family.
Right. I have a question here that is, I guess it can be interpreted many ways, from Carlos Salinas, and I would imagine it's not Carlos Salinas de Gortari, but it says, how do we tolerate our own familia? I mean, I don't know how you interpret that question, but I mean, the way that I see it is how, families are divided. And sometimes it's very difficult for us to teach each other and convince each other, what to believe and what not to believe when it comes to elections, when it comes to the vaccine and COVID. How do we tolerate our own familia? How do we unite our familia?
Look, I'm dealing with this with my familia. Most of my familia is in Mexico, and it is in my family in Mexico where this comes up. How do I deal with it? The same thing, no me quedo callada. I speak with love. So I try not to, do the lecture and then, yeah, no. But I speak with love. I most recently, when I was able to see my tia, last before COVID, and she's a very conservative woman. And I was talking in a very gentle way about having friends of mine who are gay, who are lesbian, who are trans, just kind of speaking with her. Óyeme, why is it important to be this way and to be present in our families? Not necessarily, although I understand aggressiveness, but not that I'm not talking about that, because there are many people who are listening. And I will tell you, my young nieces and nephews, they call me. They want to see me, and they share with me their deepest secrets about who they are, even though maybe they're not showing that to the family. And so I want to make sure that we understand that people who are looking for another way to interpret the world are going to be listening to what you're saying and how you're saying it. And I think this is really important. I mean, the evangelical reality for us is real, and the evangelical conversation is a delicate one. And so I'm prepared to have that when I engage, with for example, la señora que me hace el manicure, slowly, and how the information that she hears from Ecuador and why she won't get the vaccine. And I'm just, again, meeting her where she's at and trying to be there. We can't give up. That's the thing. Can't give up.
Right. And we have to face these uncomfortable conversations with what Walter Mercado would say, con mucho, mucho, mucho amor.
Mucho, mucho amor.
Con mucho amor, Maria. I thank you so much for this time, for this conversation. I think everyone who put their questions up, unfortunately, we were not able to get to all of them. It was a pleasure, Maria. Hasta pronto.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
So bye.